I can still see you if you ask questions. Okay, so this is just kind of my background. You mentioned I'm a certified herbalist, so information that comes from me is really coming from how the plant operates, but I do also have a folkloric background in understanding how we have used plants medicinally. This is our farm, and I am still here. We wrote about selling it this past summer, but we did not. We're still here. And this is our store. So when Story is the publisher, when they approached me to write about this book, I've spent the past 15 years making honey and herbs together, and it was just sort of an intuitive thing that happened for me. I quit my job. I retired out of financial industry. I was supporting computers, and I was going to raise honey and have a little business all on my own and have kids, so that I had something while I raised them. I was going to have my own little business on the side. And I was diagnosed as infertile, and they eventually kicked me out of the medical system and said that it just was impossible, that I was irretrievably broken and nobody could help me. So I was researching how to use plants for health because it was a personal need of mine, and I had already started out with honey. So it's really impossible for me, because of how I got into all of this, to separate out using honey as anything but medicine. I started combining honey and herbs together because I had both of them. I was growing both of them. It seemed logical. And we started out by, how many beekeepers are on the call? Any beekeepers at all? So we started by learning how to keep bees the conventional way. That was the only thing that was offered to us. And they were wonderful people that taught me. My husband didn't want anything to do with bees. They were wonderful people that taught me how to keep bees, but they were very much of a conventional mindset. And the conventional mindset with bees are that we need to, we're really caretaking this very stupid bug, and we get to take its honey, and the honey's wonderful, but we're constantly needing to go in and caretake because it's too stupid to manage its colony appropriately. So a lot of the beekeeping ideas come at the point of, we're gonna protect the bee from herself. We're going to get in there and keep her from moving up in the boxes because she doesn't know any better, and we're gonna stop that. We need to clean up after her. We need to do all of this management. And in starting to understand the human body from the perspective of somebody I was crawling inside herbalism and the plants that I was learning about, and looking at myself as part of a larger system, looking at my body with systems thinking. And the day that I stood over, my husband had this full-on hazmat suit, and he was applying mite treatment to our hives, and he had to have neoprene gloves and a special respirator. And I had to be like 10 feet away, and I was reading him the instructions, and I had this moment of like, something's not right here. This doesn't seem right. And at that point, I started changing the way that we approach the bees. I hadn't started using honey as a medicine yet. I was dabbling in it because I had the herbs and the honey. But at the moment that I realized that maybe there was a better way to interact with the bees, is also sort of the point at which I began to use the honey more as a medium of medicine making. I've been doing this on the market for over a decade now. And when Story approached me to write this book, I said, because I'm the only person on the market that's creating this, And I said two things. One, I had to explain that the way that we are keeping the bees matters. I have to explain our beekeeping practices because we believe very strongly that we don't make a healing thing for people's bodies without the bee being healthy, without the product that she's creating being fully nutrient dense and fully proper. And two, I wanted to highlight the people that, so while I had sort of accidentally come across the way that I make honey spreads, research showed me that I was certainly not the first person on the planet to discover that honey and herbs go together and become a medicine. And so it was really important that I tell their stories as well. The first time that I ever saw this, I had brought infused honey into the state of Ohio and started doing infused honey. There, if you look up infused honey online, a lot of the recipes are heating honey to get it to be herbal infused. And because of my herbalist training, I was doing something different because I didn't feel that that was appropriate. And it started to become popular, and a lot of the other beekeepers started making infused honeys. And I don't like to do anything that other people do. So I had to do something different. And my son has allergies, and so I created the Allergency honey spread. I combined herbs that are good for any kind of allergy, and I combined them with honey, and I created what we were calling honey paste. And the first one that I created was the Allergency for my son, and we were just using it in our family. But I started to work on one that I would bring out to our customers, and it was my mentors. If you know of Rosemary Gladstar, it was my mentor's energy balls. She makes these candies that are no-bake. They're like little no-bake cookie balls with plant nut butters and all kinds of powders. And I wanted to alter that and put it into a honey. So I was working cocoa and ginseng and all of these energy producer herbs into honey. And it took me 3 years to get it right. It took me 3 years to get this, what we were calling a honey paste loosely. And I finally got it right. And I started passing it around at this farm dinner that we had here. And everybody was giving me their feedback. They loved it. It tasted good, and they felt good with it. And the last person to get it was a friend from India. And he tasted it, and he just kind of got this grin on his face. And I was like, "Do you like it?" And he said, "Well, yeah, of course I do. Every auntie in India does this." And I had done it because it had seemed logical. It had been this intuitive thing. But here was evidence that it was a cultural thing somewhere else. And that kind of started us out. I found myself very quickly standing at Whole Foods one day and offering to sample out my honey paste. And the first time I saw a customer go by, and I asked her if she'd like to taste my honey paste, and I heard it. I realized that we couldn't call it honey paste because nobody wants to eat paste. So we changed it to a honey spread, and that's what we make now. The term that you'll see in my book and kind of around the world is electuary. That's Electuary. So that's caused me, because I knew that was coming out of India, it caused me to begin to look further into other cultures that already knew this. So all of that to say, there is great history here. I always start off with the bee because she's most important. And the way that we keep bees, we have fossil records of 100 million years reliably of the bee, the honeybee being on the planet. We're very young compared to that. And there are the potential for finding, we have found bees' nests even another 100, 120 million years before that. We have not found any fossilized bees to be able to be certain. But at least 100 million years, we can assert that the bee has been here. It's been co-evolving with our plants. So I find it very silly for us to create practices that are telling the bee what to do. Somehow we're smarter than the bee. They've kind of been able to handle themselves for a long time. They've adapted around a lot of stuff that natural phenomena. So they kind of know how to handle it. And our practices are bee-led. We call it bees first mentality. We believe that their health is first. If the bee isn't healthy, she's not going to produce a healthy honey. And that goes along with my other beliefs of where I get my meat, how I get my vegetables. If the soil isn't healthy, my vegetable isn't really nourishing my body. And if the animal isn't raised properly, my body isn't nourished. And so that is a foundational thing to understand about the honey that I use as medicine. So when I started looking, of course, I already knew that India had the use of combining honey and herbs, but I went in search of other cultures around the world, and I started to find that there is heavy use of this in Africa. And what I was looking for in these cultures was not just evidence that people were like, yeah, honey's medicinal and it's really good for you, because that's kind of a weak, I mean, everybody kind of knows that. So I was looking for cultures that used honey as a medicine on its own, that used herbs as a medicine on their own, but recognized that there was something different happening when honey and herbs were put together, that something else occurred. And I found in Africa, particularly in Nigeria, I found over 4,000 years of written history of this knowledge, of this awareness that they were creating something different when they put those things together. And I didn't want to just tell these cultures' stories as an outsider. So I went searching for people from each of these cultures that could talk to me. And just down the road here, my freshman year of college at Ohio Wesleyan, I roomed with a girl who had a boyfriend coming into college. And all these years later, he has moved in down the road from me. And he had married a woman from Africa. And as I got deep into this research, I thought, what are the chances? What are the chances that she is from Nigeria? Because Africa's kind of a big place. So I took a chance and I reached out to them. And in fact, Kimmy is from Nigeria, and her mom was staying with them, but only for another day. And she was visiting from Africa. And so I asked if I could come down and talk and what I wanted. And her mom graciously sat with me, and she wrote out 3 or 4 pages front and back of current mixes that they use for health. And there's a bit of a renaissance right now in Nigeria of people going back to their farmers markets, going back to traditional healers, and going back to growing their own food because they had kind of adopted some of the westernized ways. And it was really exciting to talk to her. And I also got to eat a Nigerian feast. But 4,000 years of written history of understanding that honey is fabulous, herbs are useful, but when they're combined together, there's something else going on. In India and in Ayurvedic traditions, I found a rich history. They have written documentation back to 1000 BC. And this is where it all began for me. Ayurvedic practices show honey being used as a vehicle for herbs, for medicines, as amplifying the effect of the plant in the body and taking it to deeper levels of imbalance, and also making whatever was being used, even if it was somewhat toxic all on its own, making it more acceptable to the body, safer and more useful. India is also where I came across the first time I came across hearing that honey should never be heated. And I avoided heating honey at all because of this traditional knowledge. And when I went to write this book, I found the science, which I'll talk about in a little bit, the science that supports that. I should say that anytime I find evidence in a cultural background, a healing tradition, I take that very seriously. Those cultures have lived it. They have, that wisdom is very important, but I love to back it up with science. I love both sides. I think it's very inappropriate to stare completely at what our ancestors have done, just as it's very inappropriate to stare just at scientific research. But we can come to a better understanding if we balance both of those. It's very, right now we're really missing the boat because we stare at science way too much, and we don't value what our ancestors are telling us. So lots of stuff here in India and in the Ayurvedic tradition. Their heating of honey, they do not heat over 104, and I will explain more why. China and traditional Chinese medicine has a long history. They are, I think they have back to 2000 BC written documentation of this. And I should mention here that Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine also talk about honey being very nuanced. This is something that I have come to be very convinced of, that we misunderstand what honey is. And the reason, one of the things that I used to call that out is when we get to the Americas, we don't have, in North America, we don't have a lot of written history of the honeybee. It was an import. The European honeybee is what we typically talk about when we talk about honey. The truth of the matter is there are 16 to 20,000 species of bee, and only about 6 to 7 of them actually collect honey. And the European honeybee is not the only one that does that. And when we talk about South America, and we talk about China, and we talk about India, oftentimes they are talking about using stingless bee honey. And if you've ever tasted stingless bee honey, it is something altogether different than the honey that we're used to, of what we get from hives here and what we're pouring on our biscuits. Across all of those cultures, they have talked about different elemental connections with the honey. Ayurveda talks about, when you look at their healing modality, they talk about the elements. So air and water, we talk about vata and pitta and kapha. And in traditional Chinese medicine, they talk about wood and fire and water and earth. And they're very similar in understanding these different elements within our bodies and also within the natural world. And they classify different types of honey. Traditional Chinese medicine talks about wood honey or metal honey. And in studying what they're doing in South America with stingless bees, I'm convinced that what we see across these texts are not different honeys that are collected from different plants, but different species of stingless bee and where they're nesting that are providing the different honeys. South America to this day will brag about their honey being much more medicinal, and there absolutely may be something to that. When we talk about stingless bees, they're gathering it in little pots. They make little tiny pots that, not like what you see on the screen here. It's a big representation of it, but they are very tiny, and you have to cut off the top of these tiny little pots, and you get tiny little drops of honey out of it. They're not as prolific as the European honeybee, and that's why the European honeybee has wound up all over the planet. In North America, our history with honey really began with the movable hive system. And in about 1867, when we finally had the movable frames, we had the beekeeping lobbyists kind of came to be. We have the American Beekeeper Journal, and we have things that are being published, and it's our history becomes sort of a right-hearted, wrong-headed is my favorite way of explaining this. Like they began to promote honey as something that we should cook with. Here's how to cook with it. Here's how to bake bread. Here's how to put it in your biscuit recipes. Here's how to make cakes, barbecue sauces. And the idea there was to create more demand for honey as a commodity, to create more revenue stream for farmers that needed more revenue stream. And that sounded wonderful, but I think it took us in the wrong direction with what honey really should be. Because in every one of these other traditional societies, honey is a medicine. It is not a sugar. It is not something that it's not something we cook with, for sure. It's not something that we just eat as some sort of sugar substitute, or as even an idea that it's a healthy sugar substitute. It's a medicine. It's always treated as, respected as a medicine. And it wasn't until we began to commodify it here in the West that changed. So today, I believe that that's a lot of our problem. We are impacting the bees negatively because of that decision, and we're impacting ourselves negatively because of that. Modern beekeeping is actually only about 150 years old, and that's pretty young. We talk about it as if it is, conventional beekeeping is so old, and it's the way, it's the old way, and it actually isn't. Human history has not interacted with bees in the way that we do today. Human history, the real old timers interacted with their bees in a different way. We have books. If you get into beekeeping, we have books like At the Hive Entrance, which is a really stellar book that teaches you to listen to the hive, to sit at the entrance and listen to them and learn from them and observe them. We have a lot of knowledge in what our old timers actually wrote down, even in the West. And we've gone very far away from that. We have oversimplified honey. It is very easy for me to look at honey and see a liquid that is golden and sweet. I can't see anything else. But that is not what the bee sees. The bee sees different levels of carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, different phytochemicals. We do see beneficial healing phytochemicals, which I would explain to you. There's primary compounds and secondary. So primary and secondary chemicals in each plant. And the primary chemicals we recognize as calcium and magnesium and vitamin A and B and all of those things. That's the primary. The secondary are the alkaloids and the essential oils and the antioxidants and those sorts of things. Until the 1980s here in this country, plant science didn't even recognize those secondary compounds as anything but waste in the plant. It was just waste that happened when the plant was carrying out its biochemical job. So now we're just starting to figure those things out. The bee, however, can register all of those differences. And when she collects the nectar and the pollen, It's the same thing as us going to the grocery store. It is gathering. We don't see the entire grocery store as sugar, even though a lot of our food breaks down to sugar. We see the difference. We see the cucumber as different than the bean, as different than the potato. And we gather that and we create a balanced diet. We fill our larders with a balanced nutrient load. And then we fill our medicine cabinet with medicine. And that's what's happening with the bee. But because we have oversimplified in our inability to see that, we have simplified it down to a sugar substitute and we've commodified it. We have created a problem in the way that we keep bees and interact with them. So I've talked a little bit about the chemicals that are in honey. The real truth is that we cannot define honey as having any certain amount of nutrient across the board. Anybody who tries to say, oh, honey is really high in vitamin C, or it's really high in antioxidants, we can't say that. Some honeys are high in vitamin C, some honeys are high in antioxidants, but it differs in which bee. And then we start to split into, we haven't even really looked at what's going on with the stingless bee, but which bee is collecting, what time of year, what's going on with the weather from year to year, that changes, what plants they're collecting. All of this feeds into what we can actually identify is going on in honey. So to use honey straight as a health benefit, we can't claim that it's going to give us this particular nutrient. We can't say it's filled with vitamin C and so it's great for our immune system. We just can't. We have to go by what honey is. What are the chemical properties of honey? What does it mean for us to call it honey? So when the substance of honey is at its definition point, when we can call it honey, it is so because it has a certain level of acidity. It is high. It's a high acidity food. It has a high sugar content, and it is it has a chemical process has happened in which the bee herself has added glucuronic she's added an acid from herself to break down the glucose in the honey to hydrogen peroxide and gluconic acid. Gluconic acid is a preservative. This is why we can take things, they preserve people in pyramids with honey. This is why we can preserve our foods with honey. The hydrogen peroxide is it's an antibacterial. And this is why the stingless honeybee honey from South America is actually, we can begin to agree with the argument that they have a more medicinal honey, because the stingless bee in South America is producing honey with a higher amount of hydrogen peroxide. And this is why if you taste stingless bee honey, it tastes more like medicine. It's medicinal. It's very vinegary. It's very strange, dark, much more liquid. It's a different experience. I highly recommend it. It will kind of blow your mind. But they have a right to claim that their stingless bee honey is more medicinal than ours. Honey has a high sugar content, which is why it becomes it's water loving. So it will pull the water content out of the middle of a bacterial cell and dehydrate it, thereby killing it, not allowing anything to grow inside of honey. So honey on its own, this is why we see it as battlefield medicine. We see it on its own being able to be a medicine. It can be used to topically heal our bodies. It can be used in our bodies inside for supporting our immune system and helping our gut health. And it can be used when properly harvested for our allergies. And that's probably one of the most common things that I hear is honey as an allergy application. I will say there are a couple little things that you need to know. One is it needs to be raw. Most people know that. It needs to be local, and that's not a distance. That's not within a 20-mile location. That is, your honey needs to be collected in an area where the same general things are blooming at generally the same time. So in Ohio, that means we can get a local raw honey that is almost from somebody almost all the way up to Cleveland and almost all the way down to Cincinnati. It's a really big radius. The other thing that's really critical and most people don't talk about is that your honey has to be collected at the time of your allergy. So if you go to your local beekeeper and you get beautifully raised local raw honey and it's been harvested in the spring and you have fall allergies, it's not going to help you with your allergies. It will help do lots of other things and it will be wonderful for you, but it will not be an allergy medication. It needs to have those nectars and pollens in it that your body is having trouble with when you encounter it as an airborne. And all you need is a teaspoon, and you can do the same with pollen. But this is something that we've known, most cultures know honey has this ability. We have plenty of research, we have plenty of books that talk about how to use honey for health, and where we've used it for sores that don't heal for diabetics and wounds and burns, and it's amazing for all of that. But for the past 10 years, I haven't been using it for that. I've been using it for its ability to create a synergy. So honey itself is antimicrobial, antibacterial, and anti-allergenic across the board. As long as it's honey, it does that. Doesn't matter where in the world you get it. And you can buy New Zealand honey if you want for $30 for a little jar. You can buy that and it will be wonderful for you. It won't help your allergies. And it's not going to hurt you because it's harvested outside of your area. But getting something local is going to be the best for you. Here I usually tell you that if you're looking for what we know about Manuka, which I just mentioned in the little shot about cost, Manuka is everything that they say that it is, but it's just been studied. It's gone through the process of getting medical approval and all the patents and all the wonderful things, and so they can charge buku bucks for it. If you like it, it is highly antifungal and highly antibacterial, and that is because it is high in antioxidants. It is dark and bitter because of the plant that it has been harvested from. We have that same possibility here in our local buckwheat honey. And generally you don't need to spend crazy amounts. We have it in our shop from our local beekeeper that supplies honey in our shop. And it is very different. It's an acquired taste, but usually the darker your honey like that, the higher the amounts of antioxidants. And in Sweet Remedies, I go through a lot of different honeys around the world that are very high in antioxidants. But what I have been curious with is this synergy. So when I first started making the honey spread, the herbal world saw that I was having, they saw that I was having results with what I was doing, but they kind of stood on the sidelines because while I had cultural background to prove that I wasn't crazy for doing what I was doing, I have been putting herbs into my honeys at something like a 20 times less amount. So that just doesn't, that doesn't come out well. Let me say it this way. if I made a tincture with the same formula of herbs that I put into my allergency, I would need to use 20 times the amount of herb to make that tincture than I am by putting it into the honey. And the herb world has stood outside of that, not really quite wanting to sign off on that. It's almost a homeopathic level of herb that I'm using in the honey. And I've been having results with it forever. It was just instinct for me to do. But as I started to dig into what was happening from historical, it was supporting that Ayurveda says it amplifies. Ayurveda said putting it into honey, putting an herb into honey amplifies the effect in the body. So I was finding support there, but it wasn't until I wrote this book that I found the science, and medical science is supporting this out now. My favorite study that I found is in looking at antibiotic resistance. Medical science is using honey, this honey and herbal synergy that I've been calling a honey spread, to try and combat our antibiotic resistant organisms. And my favorite study, and I'm going to oversimplify here, took 3 petri dishes and an antibiotic resistant organism, and they put honey on one dish, they put an herb that is antibiotic in the middle of another, and they put both of them combined on the third. And on the first dish around the honey, there was some clearing. We had clearing, which meant that the honey was killing off that antibiotic resistant organism a little bit. And on the second petri dish around the herb, there was a little bit of clearing. But on the third, where the two were combined, they were seeing clearing up to 20-fold and more. And I went and looked at what I was instinctively creating in these formulas, and it's about 20-fold the difference over what we see in typical Western herbalism use. So honey is an amplifier. When we put herbs together in the honey, we are able to amplify the effect of the herb. And you may say, well, that can be really dangerous sometimes. But what we also see across cultural data is that not only from the historical data, we see that they have seen it always as buffering, as protecting. So it was less dangerous. And studies that I'm finding are bearing that out and suggesting that immersing a hepatotoxic substance, something that is toxic to the liver, into honey can prevent that toxicity for the liver. So there's something different going on. And we can see it in modern science, and we can look across the cultural history of all of these other places around the world that have known this without needing the science, that something different is happening when we combine, when we use honey as a medium, not just as something that goes on our biscuits, but as an actual medium that has huge potential here. So what excites me is that if I had $1 billion, I would be doing research on this right now. But what if we could use antibiotics immersed in honey to treat somebody? Is it possible that we could use less antibiotics and have less negative side effects? Could we do this in combination with medication, not just using it with herbs? And conversely, should we be warning people that if they're using a lot of honey along with their medications, that it might amplify the effect of their medicine? I think there's so much potential here in putting both the cultural data and the Western medicine together, and thinking about honey as a medium for delivering medicine, as opposed to, when we go to Bob Evans and we eat biscuits. That, wow, it kind of blows my mind. So Any questions? Because I'm going to get into how we use honey then to create. Okay, either you have no questions or 10 of you are fumbling with the mute button in the left-hand corner and can't get it to undo. So I'll keep going. Now that I know, so I had finally created, I've been doing this forever and it's been working really well. I've got my sleep honey is getting people off of heavy medications, and my allergies, the Allergency is helping people with allergies that have been on steroids and in the hospital otherwise. And that's so exciting. But to claim that we can use honey as a medium for medicine, it's just not, we can't just turn people loose and be like, oh, honey's great, put herbs in it and it'll work. Honey is still it is a definable chemical entity that we can understand. And to harness it as a medicine making medium, we have to understand what it's capable of. So in an infused honey, I do not heat my honey. That means I have to rely on its hydrophilic property, meaning its water-loving property. This means that if I put an herb down into the honey and I let it sit without applying heat, the only thing that it's going to do is absorb anything that is water soluble, kind of like a tea. Without the addition of heat, I'm going to only get some chemicals into it. So we can make a beautiful thyme infused honey. We can use a sage. So each one of these, I'll show you a representative herb that we might use. I can put sage into an infused honey, and here I'm doing this like a folkloric tincture. I'm putting the herb down into the honey and I'm letting it be immersed for 4 to 6 weeks to draw the chemicals that I'm looking for into the honey. And then at the end, I'll take the herb out and I'm just going to enjoy the honey all by itself. Sage has quite a few water-soluble chemicals that are worth my time and energy to work into the honey. And I can do this without heat. And I'm going to get something at the end. I have a lot of opera singers that use the sage-infused honey for sore throats and to make sure that they can go on stage and use their voice. And so I know that the water-soluble compounds within sage I can isolate that with just raw honey and nothing else. So we have to think about what has those chemicals in them. I can't put myrrh. Myrrh is highly resinous and it has very strong secondary chemicals that need high alcohol content. I can't put that into an infused honey and let it sit 4 to 6 weeks and think that I've got a honey. It's not magic. There is something that's happening chemically. And so for me to use it therapeutically, I need to understand that. Oxymels, how many of you, anybody make fire cider at home? Fire cider is something that you should definitely learn how to do, and it is a classic oxymel. Oxymels are a combination of honey, vinegar, and an aromatic herb. And fire cider, there was a recent book put out. Rosemary Gladstar just had a book come out. I contributed to it. And there's like over 100 recipes of how to use fire cider and make it. It's onions and garlic and horseradish and citrus and cayenne, and it's all infused into the honey and the vinegar. And we've been making oxymels. Hippocrates treated people with oxymels. Oxymels give me the opportunity to isolate chemicals out of the plants that I can't just do with honey alone. So when I make an oxymel, I heat my vinegar and I place my herb into that and allow it to get started. And then I add my honey. That heat allows me to isolate chemicals that are like they're slightly water soluble, but they require a little bit more help. They require some heat to isolate. And I have cayenne here, capsicum frutescens, okay, capsicum frutescens as an example of that. Cayenne is minimally water soluble, has a lot of water to it. But if I want to isolate capsaicin, which is what I generally want for the anti-inflammatory properties, I need heat. So I can make a delicious, yummy, hot, spicy infused honey, but I can't make a cayenne therapeutic honey as an infusion. I've got to use an oxymel because I can heat that vinegar and then I can combine the honey. And generally you allow an oxymel to infuse. Once you dump everything all together, you let that infuse for at least 2 weeks and up to 6 weeks. Of course, the electuary is where I have been sitting as my home for the past 10 years. And an electuary is the combination of the herb itself and I powder it. So all of my formulas in Sweet Remedies talk about powdered herb blended with honey, and you blend it together and it stays there. I don't separate it out. I don't let it soak. I blend it and we eat it. This goes along with my other soapbox that I travel on, and that's that I think we should eat the whole plant. When we eat the whole plant, we're getting the entire, I don't mean the root, the leaf, and the flower. I mean, if we use the leaf for therapeutic benefit, if we eat the whole leaf, we don't have to worry about the side effects. We're not isolating one chemical. We're not leaving all of the other chemicals behind in the plant. So when we consume it, we have less chance of problems with that plant. The electuary has us eating whole plant medicine. Everything's in there. And it allows me to skip over all the worry about whether the honey has the ability to isolate a deeper compound. I don't care, because the honey is now a delivery method and the plant will bring all of the chemicals that I need. So wild lettuce is a great example here. Wild lettuce has, it has an opiate level. It is an opiate level pain reliever without addiction, without digestive issues. And usually the slide is a little bit off. You can just see it on the right-hand side. There's a milkiness. That's part of how we identify this plant. It's a weed. It's in all of your backyards. It may just be coming up, but it will be coming up everywhere here shortly. When we break it, it has that milky exudate, and that is where our compounds are. But they're too heavy to isolate just with the honey. I would have to use a very high proof of alcohol to isolate the pain relieving parts of wild lettuce. And also it's really bitter. So if I put it into a honey and I put the powder in and we just consume that powder, I can provide pain relief in its whole form without causing any kind of issues, and that I can use less. The exciting thing about being able to use less plant in an electuary is that as a conservationist, I am a United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary here, and that is a group that works to preserve habitat for our endangered medicinals. Obviously, as I travel and tell people more and more, hey, you need to use natural stuff in your backyard. Go for the simple first, and then if you continue to need help and you still need emergency care, go to the doctor. If everybody does that, we start to eat up our natural resources again. The exciting thing about an electuary is that I can use 20 times less to make medicine, and I can impact the wild populations of the herbs that are endangered. If I really need to use that plant for somebody because it's the right plant for them, I don't have to impact the natural stands as badly. So that is everything that I have to say. In the book, I talk about making cordials. I talk about making tinctures with honey, so alcohol and honey combined. I talk about making pills, so your own pills and capsules with the honey. And then I show you how to take all of these recipes, because I believe that we shouldn't be making medicine and then using it as medicine as often as possible. We need to be making things that are daily vitality, daily vibrancy, and then loving them and enjoying them and eating them daily. That's where our ferments come in. That's where all of those good habits. I don't necessarily enjoy my cod liver oil every day. I haven't found a way to do that, but for the most part, I'm a big fan of making things that you're going to enjoy. And most of the herbal world has seen honey as something to bury nasty tasting herbs in. And the only purpose of honey is to make those things taste better. I think we really make a mistake in oversimplifying honey, and by refocusing onto it as a carrier, as a medicinal base, as a medium to create tonics that we are using day in, day out, we can use less honey and we can use less herb. So my husband altered this slide. It says fair attendees, which none of you are. All he did was put in the code to give you guys an opportunity to have a special deal on our website if you want to check that out. Why can't you use the essential oils instead of the plant? Because you should never ingest essential oils. What is the name of my last book? Is Sweet Remedies.
Any other questions?
I have one still about the Manuka honey.
Uh-huh.
Can you explain like the different, like 10X and 15, and do you really need to buy the high?
I did a Facebook Live on our Soda Farm Cafe page, and I shared what the difference is in the 10X, and it's a difference in one of the compounds that they've isolated in there, and it just depends on where they've harvested it from. I don't necessarily believe there's a lot of reason to be concerned with that level of it. Somebody sent me a Manuka. I'm going to tell you that I've forgotten what that is, and it's on my Facebook page somewhere. I can't remember what the 10X, what it's looking for, but I don't have the sense that I care so much about the different compound within it. Whatever they harvest and bring back, as long as the honey isn't being altered, it's going to give you that benefit as Manuka. Kind of the rest of it becomes a marketing thing.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the deal with the vegans and vegetarians, their negativity toward honey and saying, well, that's, it's bee spit or bee vomit and so on and so forth to make it unpalatable? And I don't really understand all of that.
So I am not a vegetarian or vegan, but I do understand and can sympathize with somebody who, if they have chosen to avoid the meat industry because they do not want to have their money pay into a meat industry that is exploiting and abusing and terrorizing animals. I don't want my money feeding into mass market meat either. The conventional beekeeping industry, and I'm not talking about all of the small beekeepers across the country, I'm talking about the large beekeeping industry where we get most of our honey, is incredibly disgusting and exploitative, and it treats the bees there is no respect. The bees are sick, they are dying, they are treated horribly. And I'm against that because I don't believe you know, if your creature that's creating your medicine base is like gasping for breath and is horribly sick, they're not going to make your most nutrient dense honey to create medicine on top of. And I agree with them for avoiding. I often have conversations with vegetarians and vegans though, and invite them to look at our practices. And we aren't alone. There are many beekeepers that are very conscientious and do put the bee health first, even if they don't go as deeply as we do. I invite them to look at the individual practices of the beekeeper, because I think many of them could find that they would be okay. It does not hurt them to take the honey, but it absolutely is improper for us to take without them having what they need first. I agree. I agree from that standpoint.
But don't most, sorry, I was gonna say, doesn't most mass marketed places that sell honey, don't they just use sugar water in order to dilute all that, so that not only doesn't the bees get the nutrients they need, but you're not getting what you think you're paying for?
Yeah, there is that. There are some that cut it with high fructose corn syrup. There are some that are doing sugar water. It comes back to know your beekeeper. Everything comes back to know your farmer, know your beekeeper, know who it is that is selling it to you, and stand up for yourself. And by standing up for yourself, you stand up for the animal or the bee, because you're demanding that it be done properly. And if it's done properly, then you don't have high fructose corn syrup in the honey.
Okay.
Let's see. How did I fix my inability to conceive? I created, well, first of all, I stopped ignoring me too. I was going to all of these doctors and they were saying, this is what's wrong with you. And I kept going, but I'm not sure that you're right. And they'd say, no, you're too stupid. You can't know your body. And I'd go, oh, okay. You're the doctor. And so they weren't listening to me, but neither was I. And when I was fired from the medical system, I mourned the idea that I wasn't going to have a baby for probably a week. I sat at home and I was really, really low, and I was trying to grasp onto the reality of that. And then my inner voice woke up and kind of slapped me around a little bit and said, you idiot. And I went back and I looked at all the data that I had collected, and I created a protocol and I worked it. I have 2 children. And I keep saying that wrong. I don't have 2 children. My husband and I have 2 children together, took both of us. He's in there too. So we have 2 children, and that is something that I wrote the whole journey. I had trouble with nursing. My pregnancies weren't the beautiful, glowing, magical pregnant elf that you see. So everything is good, bad, and ugly are in those books. And they're also a call for people. We need to change our preconception conversations in this country. Both men and women need to be nutrient dense and deal with their crap before they start having children, if they can. Because we give those children a strong foundation to stand on. It's an herbal that talks about what are the concerns with all different herbs, and you can decide whether that applies to you or not for preconception, pregnancy, and lactation, because I couldn't find any of that information when I was going through it. So I still help people. I get pictures all the time of babies. It's a big deal to me. That's a part of my day in, day out life, is helping people to change their lives. It was a lot of work for myself and my husband, and we still live in the exact same manner that we needed to get to be able to balance my body to be fertile. We still live that way. All of our products came out of that. My children came out of that. Our entire business and why I write books came out of that. So yeah, it's a big deal in my world. Do you still have your own bees, and do you give classes? My husband and I are talking about We do still have our own bees. We are talking about doing classes. We're putting a lot of our classes that I've been doing over the years and around the country. I speak all the time everywhere, and we're trying to put all of those things on our website. So I've been doing Facebook Lives every day. I've been doing free, through this COVID thing, I've been doing free skills because I want to combat the fear and I want to give people something tangible to start to feel more empowered with. So my Facebook feed is filled with those videos. We're beginning to put those things more online, and beekeeping is probably one of those things. Ketogenic question. You're saying sugar type substances seem to negatively affect. So I'll say about ketogenic, my 2 cents, my soapbox 2 cents to you is that a lot of those diets can be great. I caution anybody to look at them as the end all be all for the rest of their lives. Please try and look at that as a healing diet, a chance for you to heal and use it to rebalance your body, but at some point to begin to incorporate, we are intended to be omnivores, so beginning to incorporate things back into your diet, that's balance. We are not balanced when we have eliminated everything from our diet. You know, we can eat this cracker and we can suck on air and nothing hurts, so yay. That's because nothing hurts, you're not there yet. That's great, and that's to be taken really seriously. But then you have to begin to build your digestive health and be able to tolerate most foods. Whether you choose to eat those foods or not is up to you. But we do need, real health is when we can tolerate most foods. Sugar can definitely throw you off. You can begin to actually have trouble digesting it if you cut it all the way out. We need sugar. And so the ketogenic diet scares me because people begin to quantify vegetables and fruits and whether they do carbs and sugars. And again, I would say if it's a healing diet that's working for you, awesome. Just be careful that you're not being so strict with it for the rest of your life. You can begin to have reactions to the sugar, and especially the fructose in sugars, and honey contains fructose. So I would say go softly. If you have cut sugar out in a very strict manner for a while, go softly back into it. Honey, if it's raw, goes into the bloodstream slowly, but it has to be raw, and you only need a teaspoon at a time. Is a tincture you make with honey from bees locally here in Ohio effective for someone to use in California? Depends on what it's for. So my allergency formula is for any allergy: dust, mold, dirt, dog, food. Doesn't matter whether you're in California or you're on the moon or whether you're in Ohio, because it's not about the honey. Other than that, the honey amplifies, wraps around, and delivers the herbs. So that formula can go anywhere and be used. And the same with a tincture. If you're using the honey as a delivery, as a synergist, if you're looking for the honey to do its job in all on its own as an allergy factor, then yeah, it needs to be. My local honey here in Ohio isn't going to help you for that, for the pollen allergies in California. Coronavirus and the use of honey. I have been using honey formulas with people, and I have a WellFast formula that delivers. I have one for autoimmune folks as well as just general, and that can deliver elderberry and adaptogens and things that support and balance the immune system. I don't have any reason, I would not tell you not to use honey during the coronavirus. And in fact, a teaspoon a day to deliver herbs that can be beneficial for the respiratory health, which is what we should be focusing on. Respiratory health, digestive health, and immune health, because we can't control viruses in our environment. They're there, they're going to continue to be there, they're going to continue to come. So the best offense is a good defense. I use honey for all of those systems to support them. And it's not a concern that the sugar is going to be inappropriate or pull you off balance or take you somewhere where you are more exposed and prone to getting a virus. Do I recommend against honey in tea? No. You can put it in hot drinks, just so long as it is not going to take all of the skin off the inside of your mouth. If it's not going to scald you, it's cool enough to put honey in. Just don't put it into things that are actively heating or boiling. So Ayurveda, the Vedas actually list a temperature 104 is where they say that's it. Anything above, and it will create ama, A-M-A. That is their terminology for toxic sludge, basically. And that's what it creates is a very thick, dense mucus that will attach itself to our mucous membranes predominantly throughout our digestive tract. And it is very difficult to shed. We do not want patches of mucus attached to the insides of our intestines. And so that's why I use our tripholis bread to get rid of all of that crap, very literally. Do you consult on how to heal oneself, as in which honey to use for each? Yes, I do. I do consults. I usually do them in the store on Tuesdays. I allow for times because we're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays, and I see folks for one-on-ones. I call them health coaching because really I give you educational resources. I'm going to help you form your own plan. I don't believe in telling anybody what to do. I don't believe in telling you take this tincture 3 times a day and call me in 2 weeks. And that's not my style. I want to help you devise a plan that you can work. I have been doing that in person for a while, and with the corona and a lot of our stuff going online, I'm probably going to add long distance stuff, go back onto the Zoom meeting things. Any other questions?
I can take the virus one, but thank you so much for coming and talking to us. And we'll come back to you in just 1 second. As far as the virus that's going on, I've spent the last 4 weeks harvesting the data on the virus. And there's a website that I've built, and it's available. If you go out to the chapter website, it's on. If you can come to this meeting, just go further down the document, and our website for our chapter is right there. Go to that website and go to the bottom, and it says coronavirus website, charts, graphs, and it's also got treatments for both medicinal and nutritional, and also a little humor and a little bit of politics. Not as much, but it's all out there.
Thank you for doing that, and I will pass that along. There are certainly a lot of nutritional things we can do, and I will pass along too, if you haven't come across it, that a lot of the chest screens that doctors are seeing look very like TB. And so I did a Facebook Live on our Facebook page talking about what we have set aside at our house to be ready if somebody does get sick and show the worst symptoms. A lot of doctors are seeing a very strong similarity to TB, and licorice root is something that can be useful whether you're talking about general respiratory ailment or the SARS family of virus, and it can also be applicable to tuberculosis. And I have recipes in Sweet Remedies. I think I actually didn't make it in that I've been sharing recipes for tuberculosis.
The website also has how to build your immunity, because that's probably the biggest thing you can do right now is to build your immunity. Yep. And you can do that with A and C and D and a little bit of zinc
Yeah.
and iodine, iodine. But that's all
Yes.
documented on that website in detail from several different doctors.
A lot of the practices here, the bone broth and cod liver oil and organ meats, all of those things are so important. And it's a lot of what I got out of researching Weston Price in what I was doing to get back to being able to be fertile. And I'm so grateful that I learned those things because they're foundational. You don't have health without those. Thank you for sharing that.
Somebody asked about our PayPal, how do you donate? And if you go to paypal.com and it's asked who to send the money to, and this is all documented in the same document for our meeting. It's jtroberts@usa.com. But thank you so much for thinking about us to help keep things going.